everybody, welcome back to the Claremont Classic Garage. Today we're going to start actually putting our 351 Windsor here together, and I'm not sure how far we'll get today, but let's have a stab at it. In the last video we got everything cleaned up, we got all our bearing clearances measured, we tapped all the holes in the block. This thing is ready to start going together. Now before we start actually putting any parts in it, we need to plug it. So here we've got a plug kit we picked up. We could go ahead and start installing these. So here we go. We're going to get the back end of this thing plugged in. We've got one expansion plug and 1, 2, 3 screw-in plugs. So, I need a pair of pliers. Got my favorite old tube of Permatex here. But the lid gets stuck on it. Okay, so we're going to get some Permatex around the edge of this thing. Come on, here it comes. And then I'll just get a little dab on my finger and just go around the bore here with it. This is the back of the camshaft journal. You don't want this leaking. It's not too fun to redo this when the thing's in the car. So you get that in there and you find a socket that kind of fits it, but not too tight, because as you drive it in, the sides of it are going to collapse and you don't want it catching your socket, right? I forgot the hammer. Okay, so in she goes. Not too far, just in. And then have a look around it, make sure it's even, like not tilted, and that's good. Perfect. And then these guys, the screw-in ones, they're quarter pipe. Pretty straightforward. We just put a little sealant on them. A dab will do you, and we'll screw them in. Then once I got all 3 of them in, we'll lift this block up, get it back on the stand, and plug the rest of it. Alrighty, I got the block drain installed here. Now we've got the side core plugs, and you have to be careful with these because these are the shallow ones, and it's pretty easy to get them in crooked, and it's pretty easy to get them in too far. You got to be really careful with these guys. And get them in just, you see there's a bit of a kind of a countersink on the block. You got to get them in just past there. And then that's it. And just kind of work your way around them. The deep ones are a lot easier. They're kind of self-straightening as they go in, for one thing, and they're a lot more forgiving. But anyway, there we got them. Now we've got the little tiny plugs to put in the front. There's a screw-in plug in there that we already put in, and now there's 2 that drive in here. See these little guys? And these ones, we don't have to put the Permatex on them because they're inside the engine. So if they seep a tiny bit, it really doesn't matter because the seepage is internal. These guys, we just use a 3/8 bolt and tap them in. There, you got to get them just below flush. So there we go. Last one goes right here. Don't forget this one. Is that why they call these impact sockets? All right, we're ready to go. I want to put the camshaft in first. Sometimes people like to put the crank in first. I want to put the camshaft in first because that way I could turn it around and paint the lobes with some high zinc oil I've got. We don't have to worry about, you know, breaking in the cam because we're just putting the exact same cam and lifters that came out of it back in. I would love to put something with a little more teeth than this cam in it, but we're working on a budget, so the broomstick has to go back in. So we just start by oiling up the cam bearings. There we go. And the camshaft, you just put a long 3/8 bolt in the end of it, and that helps you kind of jiggle it in. And just be really careful. We don't want to nick up the bearings. You can also use a piece of wire with a hook on it to help you. We used to do that on the diesel engines at work, but mind you, those camshafts weighed about 80 pounds. There you go. And once it's in, make sure it turns nice. We're all set. This here is good stuff. You get it at the GM dealer. Put one of these in an engine that you're starting up to break in, and it's just loaded with zinc. I'll use one of these, and I'll usually divide it in 3 and use it as a supplement when I do an oil change on my old cars. Anything that's got a flat tappet cam, and it seems to work pretty well. And we'll just use an acid brush here and paint the lobes of the camshaft with this stuff. It'll stick like crazy to it. We'll get it on the gear, the distributor gear. And we'll put some on the bottoms of the lifters too when we stick them in. So you just get started. You have to turn the cam around a few times, you know, to get full 360-degree coverage on it. But you get the idea. Now we're going to get our crankshaft. We're just going to give it one more kind of clean. We're going to blow it off. And what we're going to do now, we're going to drop it in. We're going to install the center cap that's got the thrust bearing, torque it down, and then we're going to check the thrust before we go ahead and actually install the crankshaft. We've got our dial indicator set up here on the end of the crankshaft. And we're just going to jiggle it back and forth here. Let's get this thing set to 0. This is not exactly a high-end instrument here, but we'll do what we can. Now the factory spec is 4 to 8, a maximum of 12. And we've got 5 or 6, depending on how hard you pry on it. So that's good. Five. We'll call it 5. But that's right where they want it, 4 to 8. So that's good. Now we can take the crankshaft out and install it for keeps. This is an older engine that still uses a 2-piece rear main seal. the one-piece rear main seal came around in the early 80s, 83 or 84. If you have one of these blocks and you've got it in the machine shop and you're paying them to hot tank it and bore it and hone it and put cam bearings in it anyway, get them to bore the back of it for the one-piece rear main seal. There's enough meat there. It's a pretty popular operation or job to do on these blocks. It's just better. So how this works, the two halves get pressed into this groove, and there's a corresponding groove in the main cap. They butt against each other here, and theoretically it's supposed to not leak. People like to put sealant on these things, and man, I hate putting sealant on it, but I don't know. I'm going to fiddle around with it for a minute and decide what I want to do. So I caved. I put just a wisp of sealer on this thing. Not enough to really do anything. And important, on this parting line here, this face, just smear a little bit with your finger to keep any oil from wicking out under the cap. So now we're going to put some oil on these bearings, and we can lower the crankshaft in. Now I'll put a little oil on these bearings. And the seal, the lip of the seal. And we can drop the crankshaft in. Man, this is a lot heavier than them 302 ones, I'll tell you that. Just drop it in nice and straight. There we go. Now put a little oil on these journals. And the thrust face. There we go. And we can put the caps on. I'll oil up the shells on the caps too. And don't forget to oil up the lip on the rear seal. Then we'll put some more oil on the threads of the bolts and a little dab there where the head is going to contact the cap. Man, we haven't put an engine together since we were racing. Now what's important, once the crankshaft is in, before we start tightening anything up too much, we want to get the thrust bearing set. So you just put a little tension on it, just a little bit, so the cap will stay put. And then you just give this a whack with a piece of brass on either end. And that'll set your thrust bearing. Now we're going to run down all these bolts, torque them to 100, and I'll be back when I'm done. Now, if everything went well, it should turn. There we go. There's a little drag, that's the rear main seal, but she turns beautifully. There you go, that's about top dead center, number one. Bring that around. There we go. Okay, I'm getting called in for dinner. Now we can install the thrust plate for the camshaft. You can see here it's got this little tiny groove that leads to this passage that goes into the oil gallery. And that lets kind of a metered amount of oil get through into here to lubricate all this front stuff on the engine. Also, you see these two little bumps on this side of it? Well, they go over these plugs to keep those plugs from getting pushed out by oil pressure. So you can see it goes on there like that. Now we can slide our timing set on. So pin faces the key. That's how you get everything timed right, and she should slide right on. Something to keep on mind with these things, there's two different timing sets depending on which fuel pump eccentric you're using. So if you're using this one, the two-piece rollerized one, you'll see there it's got a little tab on the back to drive it that fits into that hole there. So it uses this style of cam gear with this little teardrop shaped thingy on the front of it and a short pin. If you're using the old-fashioned one-piece solid fuel pump eccentric, this area here it's a separate or different part number, and this is completely machined, and the pin extends through to drive it. Something to be aware of. So now we have to torque this to 40. You can do what I've done, just stick a piece of wood in there against the crankshaft. Or you could stick, if this hole is deep enough, that one actually is, you can stick a 1/2 inch extension in there. But anyway, we're good. We'll just torque that up. 40. There we go. And now what we're going to do is we'll run the crankshaft bolt into the end of the crankshaft, and we'll just turn it around a bit and make sure everything feels good. So let's see what we got. We should be able to turn it pretty easy with this speed wrench. Yeah, there it goes. Good. Okay, so now we'll get the pretty sure. See, we don't see the timing mark on the crank anymore. Oh no, well, yeah, we're good. So there we are. There. That's right at top dead center, firing number 1. We can feel the keyway there, and there's our dot. So we'll leave it there for now, and we can close it up. We can put the front cover on it now. Now we're going to put the timing cover on. This engine does not locate the timing cover with dowels. So what we're going to do is we're going to get our gasket. We're going to get our gasket in place, and then we're going to use the balancer. We'll drive the balancer on, and that will center the cover up kind of on. It'll use the seal basically to center it, and then we can go ahead and torque the cover down. It was kind of wobbly there for a sec. Okay, there now. It's just had a gob of silicone there. All right. Now, our new gasket. It's kind of deformed. Well, that's okay. We got silicone. Got to make sure we get it going on the right way here. Think it goes that way? Yeah, I think it goes that way. So we'll get some sealant on it, especially around the water ports. Because if you get a leak here, it's possible it could leak right down into the sump and contaminate your oil. We do not want that. So we'll make sure we've got it sealed up good around there. Okay, so here we go. I went and installed a new seal, packed it with grease. I've got sealer all around our water ports. Oh, and don't forget the oil slinger for your timing chain. Now you can slide this baby on. Whoops. There we go. And she just goes on like that. Now, we're going to install this thing to center that cover up. These things you can usually just kind of tap them on. Oil up where the seal, oil it up in there. There we go. We'll give it a try with a hunk of brass and see if it seems like it wants to go on. Oh yeah, it's going on easy. There's a tool you can use to draw these on, because some of them are tighter than others, that's for sure. But this one's fine. That's it. She's bottomed out. Good. Okay, so now we got some bolts to put in here. This one here, got to make sure we remember to put the timing tab on it. These two guys go over here. Then we'll have to look up in the manual what they torque to. Gasket. The gasket moves. There we go. And these two little guys up in the top here, there's not really any torque in them. You just kind of give it your best mechanics feel. And then once we get these ones torqued, we're gonna right away get the water pump on, because these bolts pass right through everything into the block, and they're gonna tighten down against this gasket here. Very important. So there's the water pump torque down. A lot of these bolts will have to come back out after, because there's brackets that go on them and stuff like that. But for now it's torqued down, and then we can take them out one at a time to install whatever accessories we need to. And that'll be just fine. Now I'm going to flip it over so I can put a piece of wood in the crankshaft, and we'll torque up this bolt here. Well, that's pretty good. I'm going to stick the oil pan on it now for overnight. And next job will be getting the pistons in. Oh my God, an orange oil filter. It's going to explode before we even take it off the stand. I don't know. I read all that crap on the internet and watch videos on YouTube, but I've been using these things for, well, over 40 years, and I've never had a problem with one yet. Anyway, to each his own. That's what I'm using. I used to like the nice FL1A Ford ones, when they were silkscreen, but now they just paint it white and slap a sticker on it. That really pissed me off, and they charge even more for it. Made me angry. Oh well. Anyway, she's a good-looking engine, I'd say. That'll do it for this one. In the next one, we're going to get the pistons in. Got to go over the oil pump, get the bottom of it all closed up, and then we can work on the heads. Anyway, I'd like to thank you as always for tuning into the Claremont Classic Garage. I appreciate the support. We've grown this thing from nothing, and it's slowly growing, but it's doing good. The video we made about Jackson's Auto Wreckers, it's closing in on 6,000 views, and who knows by the time you see this how many views it'll have. That's awesome. Anyway, thanks again for everything. I hope you'll come back and see us again. And until then, I'm Kevin saying so long for now.